So thank you all very much for joining. We are covering a couple of different items today. As is normal for our webinars, we will give you an update of the most recent activities and things that are happening. Suzanne Bertin will provide that information to you. We'll provide an update. Jonathan Booe is joining us today from NAESB to provide an update on the NAESB activities around DERs. And then David Kathan will be walking through aggregation, registration, and review, which will be a summary of our latest paper that is posted to the FERC2222.org website. And he'll be covering the summary of that paper. So just as a reminder that this is in partnership with DOE and PNNL, but any incorrect content, expressions, or statements are fully our fault, my fault, not DOE's or PNNL's. Just a reminder for everyone that we do produce bi-monthly reports on the most kind of current and pressing issues. We've got several of those reports that have been released right now, and we cover the information on these bi-monthly webinars as well as other relevant and current information, all of it posted to the website and with the full tracker. We always like to remind everyone with the tracker that it is a bit of a crowdsourced function, so we work closely with all of the regulatory authorities and anybody that has information. We are happy to make sure that it gets into the tracker appropriately, as well as additional white papers that we will produce. Everything goes to the website. We have enabled the chat groups at this point. These are a closed forum for just regulatory authority participation and their staff to be able to talk about these specific issues or general issues, and providing them that forum to be able to talk through these issues. And we do have a library on the website. It is not meant to be a Library of Congress of everything that has happened. We are attempting to provide just the most relevant or hardest hitting items there to create a cold down list for regulatory groups to be able to have a better understanding of all of these key issues, but without having to wade through 1,000 things, trying to limit it to a few things. This bi-monthly report this time is around aggregation, review, and registration. But each one of the bi-monthly reports will hit different topics as well as give all current events. And again, they were all posted to the website. And just to remind again that the chat rooms are now live for each of the specific kind of topic areas and one general topic area for anyone that is interested in posting questions and comments. We do not review or have access to those as we are not regulators. If there is any content there that is problematic or somebody has a problem, we put the disclaimer in there, but you would have to let us know about that content, and then our administrator would go in and review that and work with you to either remove it. But if there is negative content posted, we will remove the person that posted it, and they will no longer have access to the chat room function. Suzanne, over to you.
All right. Yes, thanks, Chris. And as Chris mentioned, one of the things that we include in our periodic reports is highlights of various developments across the country related to implementation of Order 2222. So just wanted to highlight a few of those for you today. On the RTO ISO front, MISO submitted its third compliance filing to FERC back in March, and this compliance filing addresses a couple of outstanding issues. First, removal of a 10 megawatt minimum threshold in the review of physical withholding by market monitors. And the second item is adding a requirement that electric distribution companies must inform DER aggregators when DER operation is overridden by the EDC. Additionally, MISO worked together with the Organization of MISO States to hold a workshop through MISO's DER task force, and that was held in mid-February to help identify next steps for those groups to work together. On the state implementation front, Maryland issued a couple of orders just recently. This is actually new information from since our last report was issued, but just wanted to note that they did issue an order regarding their inquiry related to FERC 2222 implementation. They directed additional study from the utilities on a variety of topics, and so really, for the most part, they have deferred most of their issues for later consideration after those reports are due, which is about 6 months from now. Also, Maryland is at the same time working on their DRIVE Act implementation, and they issued an order related to that, which requires the staff to consult with stakeholders to further refine the staff's draft DERA registration application and to file a modified proposal by early June. In addition, New Jersey Board of Public Utilities held a technical conference back in January, and that was a full day event. They have been working to synthesize stakeholder feedback following that technical workshop, and we hope to get more information from the staff there on next steps fairly soon. Meanwhile, the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio has requested comments on their technical interconnection and interoperability rules for DERs, and that includes potential adoption of the IEEE 1547 2018 standard. New York has...
I'm going to do one quick interruption here and just put in a big vote of confidence that all states should have already adopted 1547 2018. It is a definitive need for adoption and very, very important. And so just wanted to plug that as a very necessary standard as we move forward with DERs. Sorry, Suzanne.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, appreciate that. And regarding the state of New York, they have, of course, launched a major initiative that they're referring to as the Grid of the Future proceeding. The initial plan for the Grid of the Future was filed recently, and it is now out for comment. They've requested comments by May 21st. So hopefully there will be a lot of good stakeholder feedback on that. With that, let me pass it on and we'll talk about NAESB updates next.
So Jonathan, over to you. I don't think Jonathan needs any introduction to this world of worldview, but Jonathan Booe from NAESB. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris, and thank you to the Collaborative Utility Solutions for inviting us to participate. It's been great to reconnect with you guys. We've all worked with you and Michael and David in different capacities, Scott Coe as well over the years. So it's great to connect back on this. I won't go through a whole lot of background on NAESB because I'm assuming some people have some familiarity, but for those of you that don't, we got our start about 30 years ago with the support of the Department of Energy and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and we were created as a gas industry standards board. And our first efforts were to develop business practices that supported, the standardized information that's communicated by parties that are moving gas on the natural pipeline system. And that was really our initial mission. We're a 501c6 nonprofit, but today we are now in 2001, we went from just serving the wholesale gas market to also supporting the retail gas and electric markets as well as wholesale market. We're American National Standards Institute accredited organization. That means that our process for developing standards meets certain criteria that they set as an organization, and those include having an open process, making sure things are fair and balanced, and that the standards that we adopt are actually consensus-based and represent, the full industry, not just specific segments of the industry. We continue to maintain a really good relationship with FERC and work with them on a almost a daily basis on some of our standards development. We also have a great relationship with NARUC and several state commissions where our retail standards are applicable. And then we're also very tied in with NERC. They develop the reliability standards for the bulk electric system, and we help support that where there's commercial transactions that are related to that. We try to develop preliminary standards. We have a number wholesale electric standards that we've developed that are just specific to support some NERC interactions. And in the DER space, that's, we're talking to them very often and following what they're doing, and they're updating us, and they've been interested in some of our DER standards activities as well. And of course, we work with all the various trade organizations, NGSA, INGA, AGA, the whole alphabet soup that's out there. And we also participate on the American National Standards Institute, ANSI, their board of directors. So we have around 300 corporate members, but participation in our standards development is open to all interested parties. And at times we've had over 1,000 different individuals, volunteers participating in some of our projects. As you can see on this slide, we're organized by market, and then each market is divided by segments. So, for gas, for example, we have end users, local distribution companies, we have the pipeline, the midstream, producers, and service companies. And each of those segments are intentional in that our voting processes make sure that each company that's a member that's within that segment has a place to vote. And as I said, part of our accreditation is that we protect minority interests. And so, if one segment of the market is uncomfortable with something that we're moving forward, they have the ability to stop it. So it's just part of our anti-accreditation process for developing standards. The big idea, what our goal is to make sure that anybody that's going to be impacted by a NAESB standard has a voice and can be represented appropriately. We have over 4,000 standards that we've developed, and we're on our 9th version of wholesale electric standards, our 11th version of our retail standards, and we're on our 16th version of wholesale gas standards. And all of our wholesale standards are submitted to the FERC, and we do that on a typically 18-month to 2-year timeline. And with very few exceptions, all of our publications have been adopted by the Commission or incorporated by reference into their regulations. At the federal level, we do that to be compliant with the National Technology Transfer Act, and that's an act that was put into place that requires federal agencies to use voluntary consensus-based standards from the industry whenever possible. On the retail side, all of our standards are provided to NARUC and the state public utility commissions that have an interest, but they really haven't been adopted in the same manner as the wholesale standards. They typically serve as a basis for some of the jurisdictional specific regulations and implementations, just depending on the state and their priorities. I also want to note it's important NAESB is prohibited from advocating for adoption of its standards, and that's not what I'm doing today. But we do provide education on some of our activities, and we try to keep the industry up to date with what we're doing and get as many people involved as possible. The larger the participation, we feel like the better the standard and the consensus position moving forward. And it makes it much easier for states or the FERC to adopt our standards from that perspective. We also don't set policy. We leave that up to the regulators. Our job is just to take the policies that they set and then develop an industry agreed to implementation of that. But our standards cover a very broad array of transactions and market functions. In the natural gas market, for the wholesale market, we set, the actual gas day, the nomination confirmation process for moving gas through the system. On the electric side, we help develop standards to support the open access sync time information system, where, the processes used to schedule electricity on the bulk electric system. And then in retail, we have a lot of standards to support customer choice states and some of their business practices. And we do that. We have a number of EDI standards for, communicating information electronically that's required to, enroll customers, drop customers, those type of things. So, it's a kitchen sink of standards here at NAESB. But one thing that we always try to do is put, cybersecurity and efficiency as kind of an umbrella of everything that we do in all our standards. So I'll start off mentioning this, our DER related efforts that were initiated by the Department of Energy, our most recent activity. We developed a standardized contract that supports bilateral negotiations between distribution utilities and DER aggregators for grid services. And, we catered this to be provide some optionality so it can work in any jurisdiction, state or local authority scheme. We initiated this effort, as I said, in response to the DOE, and they felt that coming up with a model agreement would be helpful in, moving things for aggregators that are active in multiple jurisdictions. In total, we had over 80 individuals that participated in the development of the contract, and there was representation from, of course, aggregators, electric utilities, ISO RTOs, and NARUC, who participated and spent a significant amount of time making sure that the contract provisions that we created would be, ready and available for everybody in the market. We also developed, as part of this, what we're calling conditions precedent addendum to the contract, and we did this so that contract negotiations between the DER aggregator and the distribution utility could take place before the aggregator is completely registered with the utility. And so those two pieces are working together. As I said, we announced this with the Department of Energy at the end of last year is when it was finalized. And, we make this available now to our members. And of course, anybody that's interested can come purchase the standardized contract from NAESB. I want to cover 4 other activities that we have. One we just completed, which is this cybersecurity related effort. We did this jointly between our wholesale electric members and our retail members. And we went through and looked at some of the cybersecurity protections, for example, that would be required by our contract. There's terms and conditions specific to securing data. And we looked at some different schemes out there, including public key infrastructure, PKI schemes. And we tried to come up with a use case where cybersecurity standards would be helpful that don't already exist. And we went through a process for about 6 months, but at the end of the day, we decided not to move forward with any specific standards. The idea being that each individual utility would have their own requirements and that standardization in the area may not be appropriate. The other big one which we just got underway, and we're very excited that Collaborative Utility Solutions is going to be heavily participating, but this is an effort to support interoperability between DER registries. The idea is that we can, either create interoperability or create some sort of standardization that would help make sure that the data that's collected by the different registries is interoperable or standardized or formatted so that it can be shared on a larger scale, potentially at a national level. We held our first meeting on April 21st. I guess that was just at the beginning of this week on Monday. And we had pretty good participation. Our first meetings are always a little bit slow. We get people in and kind of introduce things, but I think it's going to pick up pretty quickly. We're working to schedule a second meeting. Part of what we're going to do during that meeting is have, representatives that, are active in the registry area, including Collaborative Utility Solutions, come and present to the group. And then we'll really start to drill down and see if we can't come up with a good use case for a standard in the area. And if you'll go to the next slide. So back to the initial contract, one other thing I want to mention is all of the NAESB standardized contracts, we go through a process of creating a standard or recommendation for how it could be used with a distributed ledger. You know, many years ago, I think it was 2018, we first received a request that we create a smart version of the NAESB-based contract for natural gas so that it could be used with distributed ledger technologies or blockchain. And so we went through that process. And since that time, every time we develop a uniform contract, we develop the parameters by which, or it's really just collecting the data elements to be necessary for recording a contract on a blockchain or distributed ledger. And so we're doing that in conjunction with our registry activity that I just mentioned. And they also had kind of a separate agenda items to look at that. But I don't expect that this is going to take a very long time because we've done this before. And as I said, we really are just focused on collecting, you know, the appropriate data from the contract that should be recorded. And then finally, we do have a provisional item on our annual plan. Our annual plan sets our activities for the year. Provisional means that we haven't moved it to an active status yet. We're still considering it. And given that we have, you know, our focus on the DER registry item right now in the contract, this one's kind of waiting in the wings. But we want to see if we can't come up with a way to develop standards that support better integration of the DER management systems by the industry. And so that's a very, very large, broad scoped item. But I think if we move it to an active status, we'll kind of narrow in on the scope and see, again, we always kind of start with a use case and move it from there. And so those are our activities that we have underway or just finished in the DER space. You know, again, anybody's welcome to participate in NAESB standards development, and you can even vote at the subcommittee level where, you know, the sausage gets made, as they say. Anybody that's participating is allowed to vote on it. We really want as wide and broad participation as possible so that we end up with a good product that the industry really endorses. So if you're interested in any of these and you'd like us to plug you in, you can reach out to me at our information here. It looks like we have the general information, but we're a small office. So if you call here, it's likely that I will answer the phone or somebody else here, and we'll be sure to get you set up to participate. So thanks again for giving me some time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
All right, not seeing any hands. So on the distributed ledger and blockchain front, we are coordinating with DOE on some additional thoughts around the distributed ledger outside of the contract structure that Jonathan has mentioned, the actual capability to create some open source code that would be made available to all DERs to allow secure credentials and secure registration on an automated basis. So we're working through some of the pieces of what that might look like as something that can be provisioned in an open source fashion to industry to simplify that process as well, making use of the distributed ledger technology as NAESB has done throughout their history for these kind of core supporting functional pieces. So just FYI on that piece. And moving on to Mr. Kathan.
Hi, David Kathan. And I want to work through one of the issues that we did write up in our last bi-monthly report. As Chris mentioned, we go through each of these different issues and we kind of provide the basics, the origin, and the basic concepts and steps that are needed in order to implement Order number 2222. Aggregation registration review is a core part of FERC Order 2222. FERC 2222, largely its primary function was to allow for aggregation of distributed energy resources into wholesale markets. But in order to make that happen, since the DERs are located on the distribution system, there was a need, and FERC recognized it and put into the order a process for the review of these aggregations and the review of the DERs that can participate in these aggregations by electric utilities and potentially regulatory authorities. So I'll walk through the basics. What FERC Order 2222 requires is that in order for a aggregation to operate, a aggregator, or what is known as a DERA, a DER aggregator, DERA for short, must sign a market participation agreement with the RTO. Essentially, the DERA becomes a market participant. And it agrees to not deviate from the FERC guidance was not to deviate from its general resource and market registration requirements that are expected from any market participant. The RTO and ISO can, and they have thus far, in most of the filings, require the DERA to comply with state and local rules as an expectation or requirement in order to participate. Registration process with the RTO must identify the set of DERs that will be part of the aggregation. And then once that is then submitted as an application to the RTO, then it starts a process of the electric distribution company, the EDC review. I'll walk through that in the next several slides. There's also potential for the regulatory review of the aggregation and the DER participation. I'll walk through that in the next several slides. And then finally, there is, at least in several of the RTOs, there is another step, which is what is the potential impact of an aggregation on transmission system. And so there was an impact review process. One note, a key note, is that this registration review process is separate and distinct from the EDC interconnection process. A DER that wants to participate in a aggregation, it must complete the existing EDC processes for interconnection to be allowed into the aggregation. There is some issues having to do with the impact of multiple DERs acting in unison as part of a new aggregation, but as far as the interconnection of an individual DER, that's a requirement to be able to participate in an aggregation. So this is a very high-level stylistic, concept diagram of what the process works. So as I indicated, the registration of the DERA is sent to the RTO, and then that initiates a process which includes what is known as a capability review, looking whether the DER, whether the aggregator is capable of participating, and that's done by the EDC. And separately, and then there's also a safety and reliability review by the EDC. And then based on that review, which will occur within 60 days as specified by FERC, the EDC will inform its decision or its any concerns it's raised about a particular DER participating. And the RTO will then inform the aggregator of the, these concerns, and then we'll ask for adjustments as necessary in the aggregation. And then, so that basically goes through the process. If there's additional issues, that then essentially starts the process over again. But if there is no issues, then the DER is registered as a market participant in the RTO market. So let's talk a little about the review. So FERC in Order 2222 required each RTO ISO to modify its tariff to incorporate a non-discriminatory process for timely review by an EDC. It directed specifically that the RTOs and ISOs to coordinate with distribution utilities to develop a distribution utility review process that includes criteria by which the distribution utilities would determine whether, as I indicated before, a capability. Is it possible? Is it, meaning that is the DER already participating in a program that limits its participation, or whether it's is not able because of other requirements or terms in the contract with the electric utility. The second one has to do with whether it has any significant risks that might be posed if it participates. Is it will it create some potential overloads or potential issues associated with stability? So those are then assessed by the RTO, the EDC. FERC specifically made a requirement that this can take no longer than 60 days. Next slide, please. So just digging a little bit more, I've already indicated the concept of each of these, but in the capability, it's looking whether the DER is already participating in another retail or wholesale program. A good example of that would be, for example, net energy metering. It's an open issue, and there's different states have different positions on it, but there is a potential that if you're in a net energy meter program, a DER would not be able to be aggregated, at least for some services. And related to that, and this is something we'll be talking about in our next bi-monthly paper, is the question about double counting. There's a definite specific requirement in 2222 to ensure that there's no double counting for planning purposes or for operational purposes. The key point here is that the double counting of the same service. There is a potential that a DER could potentially provide separate services, but the key issue is not to double count the same service. And some of the issues with energy metering relate to that. As far as reliability review, the review examines whether the participation of the DER in the aggregation would create any safety or reliability concerns. In Order 2222, the FERC required that when their EDC raises concerns about the participation of a DER, they are required to provide a written explanation for the DER removal, so that the DER can understand, what is the rationale for removal and could potentially work on that in order to address those issues. In addition, any necessary impact studies should align with the coordinated dispatch of the DERs and aggregation. Important to note, this element of aggregated and coordinated dispatch of a set of DERs could negatively impact the distribution system, and that's why there's a need to look at how they will operate in common. Next slide, please. RERA review is as I noted earlier, it's not absolutely required that the RERA or the regulator must participate in the review process. FERC let that be voluntary, but it wanted to ensure that there was a role if the state would like it in order to participate in the review process. And each of the different RTO and ISO filings have taken different levels of in focus on the participation of regulators in that review process. This has created a significant conversation at the stakeholder meetings, as RERAs are not typically involved in operational processes, nor are they staffed to support these activities. So this has raised some concerns on the part of RERAs on how much effort they need to do to participate. There are technology-enabled solutions that provide dual participation and dual counting reviews, and these will be an important step in implementation for RERAs to minimize the impact of this review. This is a bit a spaghetti diagram. It's really taking that conceptual one that I showed earlier and just showing how MISO's process will work. And if you follow through each of these various lines in here, it will eventually walk through the same process in which the aggregator enrolls a aggregation. The MISO will then take a look at it, will verify, and then we'll send down to the EDCs to examine within 10 days for the eligibility review for MISO, and then 50 days for the reliability review. And then we'll also assess whether it has a transmission impact, and then that will then potentially lead to affected systems. So the bottom line is that it works its way through to such that it is finally able to participate and will then enter into the modeling that the RTO and ISO will do. So there are several key considerations as part of this review, and we'll just walk through. The first is there a component, a key requirement that FERC specified in Order 2222 is that this process needs to be transparent. This can't be done in a black box. That's one of the reasons why FERC did come up with the requirement to have a written, written explanation for concerns, just to ensure that this is, there is the full transparency. Another issue has to do with data access. Rules or systems governing DER aggregator access and DER customer data, to facilitate ADEC review will be needed. And to ensure fair and open access while preserving privacy and cybersecurity, regulators should consider the use of a data platform, such as the DER registry developed by Collaborative Utility Solutions, that can facilitate the requirements of both security and access to the required data by different stakeholders. The key issue here is it's not just customer usage data. The key issue is information on locale of a DER's, what of its capabilities, what, whether a DER, whether a customer is already participating in other tariffs or other programs. All that information would be ideal and to provide to the aggregators so they can choose a set of DERs and not have to go through multiple processes and repeated processes of bringing forth DERs that are just not capable of participating. So absolutely, data access is a core part of the implementation of 2222. Then oversight of EDC DER reviews. These will be done by the ADCs, and it'll be absolute need for the states and RTOs to have adequate coordination to ensure that these decisions are not arbitrary and that they're based on clear criteria. And related to that is dispute resolution. Dispute resolution is, an issue that came up and was discussed at length inside of the deliberations on Order 2222. The question was, who will adjudicate the disputes that come out from the EDC review? And essentially, what FERC said is that if it has to do with tariffs, the RTO tariffs, then it is up to the FERC to adjust and to adjudicate their disputes. But issues having to do with the DER review may need state dispute resolution processes. Technology tools such as the DER registry can help facilitate dispute resolution because all the information is available and it is transparent and accessible. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, dual participation, double counting. The policies will need to be developed on this. And we will be discussing that subject in our next bi-monthly report. So that's basically the summary of what is going on in DER aggregation review, registration review. I'm happy to take any questions if people have any.
Well, we must be doing good today. So maybe just in summary, there seemed to have been a lot of confusion along the way between the interconnection process at an EDC and the capability and reliability review in the aggregation process. Just to reiterate, those are separate things. The interconnection process is governed by the utility that the system is being interconnected to and is a foundational requirement to be able to move forward into an aggregation. And the capability and reliability review that is then performed as part of an aggregation will necessarily be slightly different, because when an interconnection process reviews a single site that's requesting interconnection, it's looking at that specific single site's impact on the ability. As EDCs look at aggregation, everyone needs to understand that necessarily that aggregation is now going to be operated rather than independently and just of its own accord by each homeowner. It's now going to be aggregated and acting in unison for a market related or economic related specific activity, and they will operate in unison. And those are things that are going to have to be reviewed by the EDC and the ISOs as these aggregations get built and as they begin to operate in unison. It could have differing effects. And so that's been a major point of confusion that we really wanted to make sure that was clear here. And then fundamentally going forward, the use of standards, and particularly the IEC CIM standards for DERs, regardless of application to interaction with settlement, with operation, with registration, all of these activities, that baseline IEC CIM DER standard for the different levels, different pieces of data is going to be very important for the industry. Just like the CIM was hugely important when we started having the energy management EMS systems in our control rooms and couldn't do a dedicated software interface to every single machine in the world. We're now looking at millions and millions of DERs, and the use of that CIM standard is going to be crucial for our industry's ability to be able to share and utilize that data, regardless of the platform or whose registry or the things that go on. Having that baseline to be able to exchange data through an industry-defined standard like the IEC DER CIM is going to be very important. So maybe just to wrap up here, thank you, Jonathan, very much for participating today. I encourage everyone to engage with NAESB and be part of that stakeholder process that has worked spectacularly for a very long time for our industry to help look at these standards and help a broader and more effective implementation for industry through this process. And we encourage any feedback to us for the additional activities, reports, or additional information that anyone feels would be pertinent for us to have on the 2222 website. And just we always wrap up with, we need your help. If you're aware of anything going on in industry at a state, city, county, federal, whatever level, and it's not, you're not seeing it on the 2222 website, please let us know about that. And Suzanne will work with you to make sure that we have the most current and best information available for everyone on the tracker. So with that, I would like to thank all the presenters. And again, Jonathan, thank you so much for making time for us today and giving an update for NAESB.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me in. Again, reach out and contact anytime if you have questions about our process or want to engage.
Thank you. And I'll give one last call if anybody has any additional questions or comments on anything. Awesome. Well, thank you all for participating today. We look forward to any additional questions or comments and having the opportunity to work with everyone as we continue to work forward through the DER policy across the U.S. Thank you all so much for attending today.